My name is Evan Mercer, and in the spring of 2021, I rented a small cabin just outside Brezen City, North Carolina. I had been looking for somewhere quiet, somewhere away from the white noise of my apartment, away from the endless scroll of news and muted alarms that made my thoughts blur together. My therapist had suggested a week alone in nature, a reset. She called it. Somewhere the mind could hear itself think again. When I saw the listing, I thought it was perfect. The photos showed a weathered log cabin tucked into a slope of green with a wraparound porch and mist pooling at the tree line. It had no TV, no Wi-Fi, and a single review written 6 months earlier by someone who claimed it was a peaceful stay, though the house rules were interesting. I didn't think much of that at the time. In the mountains, interesting usually means old-fashioned. The host's name was Marjorie Klein. Her profile photo showed a thin woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a neat braid, standing in front of the cabin with her hands folded, like she was presenting it to the world. She messaged promptly when I booked, "Mr. Mercer, I'm glad you'll be staying. Please arrive before dark. It's easy to miss the turnoff after dusk." That last line stuck with me. I figured it was just a mountain road thing. No streetlights, winding gravel. But her phrasing had a quiet urgency to it. I left Asheville early that afternoon. The farther west I drove, the more the world seemed to contract. Gas stations turned into single pump sheds, and the sky flattened into a soft gray. The GPS signal blinked out 5 miles before the address. I followed hand-painted wooden signs pointing toward Deep Creek Hollow until the pavement turned to gravel. The cabin appeared just as the light began to thin, crouched under a canopy of hemlock and oak. A blue haze hung over everything, that highland mist that never quite clears. The porch light was already on, a single amber bulb glowing like a watchful eye. Marjorie stepped out as soon as my tires crunched over the drive. She wore a long cardigan and heavy boots, even though the air was mild. Up close, she looked older than her photo, wrinkled but steady, her gray eyes sharp and calm.
Was it?
She asked, voice low but firm. Yes, ma'am. Thanks for. She waved off the politeness. You're on time. That's good. Most folks get turned around on that last stretch. She led me inside. The cabin smelled of cedar and something faintly medicinal, like dried herbs. The place was cleaner than I expected. Spotless, really. A stone fireplace stood in the center, and the furniture looked hand-carved, old but well cared for. I keep it simple, Marjorie said. No screens, no clutter. The woods don't like noise. I thought she was joking. She handed me a laminated sheet of paper, edges worn soft. House rules, she said. Read them before you settle in. I glanced at it, half paying attention as I unloaded my duffel. The first few were normal enough. No smoking, take shoes off inside, leave trash in sealed bins. But the list went on, and by the end my casual smile had faded. 1. Do not open the front door after 10:00 p.m., no matter what you hear outside. 2. Keep the porch light on from dusk until dawn. Do not let it burn out. 3. If you hear knocking on the back door, it is not for you. Do not answer. 4. Before bed, check that all mirrors are covered. If uncovered in the morning, contact me immediately. 5. Always leave an apple on the porch rail overnight. Take it inside by sunrise. Do not eat it. I laughed under my breath. Is this like a local superstition thing? Marjorie didn't smile. You could call it that. But rules only matter if they're kept, Mr. Mercer. This is an old place. The land remembers. Her tone made it hard to keep joking, so I just nodded. She gave me the keys and told me she lived Down the ridge, about a half-mile, if I needed anything. As her truck pulled away, I stood on the porch and listened. The woods were completely still. Not quiet in the way of peace, but in the way of held breath. Inside, I unpacked, lit the small wood stove, and made instant noodles for dinner. My phone showed no signal, which felt oddly freeing. The night came fast, and the air grew colder. I turned on the porch light as instructed. It threw a soft cone across the yard, catching the edge of the trees where mist drifted like smoke. By 9, I was reading in bed, half asleep. That's when I heard it. The first sound, a slow, deliberate knock from somewhere at the back of the cabin. 3 beats, steady, like someone rapping on wood with their knuckles. I froze. The sound came again, softer this time. The back door, I realized. My stomach tightened. I remembered Rule Fate 3. If you hear knocking on the back door, it is not for you. I waited, barely breathing. The knocking stopped. I told myself it was a branch, maybe an animal brushing past the siding. But I didn't sleep much after that. In the morning, the air felt heavy, thick with dew. When I stepped onto the porch, the apple I'd left out was gone. Just a wet ring left on the rail. I hadn't meant to follow that particular rule, but I'd noticed a bowl of apples on the counter the night before and figured it couldn't hurt. I told myself some raccoon had taken it. I hiked that day, trying to reset. The trails near Deep Creek were lush and quiet, carpeted with ferns and old leaves. I didn't see another soul. When I returned in the late afternoon, Marjorie's truck was parked near the base of the drive. She stood by the porch steps, arms crossed. "You followed the rules," she said. Not a question.
Yeah, I guess so.
I said, forcing a small laugh. The apple thing, it was gone this morning. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Good. Keep doing that. Okay, can I ask why? Marjorie's gaze flicked toward the trees, where the light had begun to thin again. You'll sleep easier not knowing. Some things up here don't like being named. She left without another word. That evening, I tried to ignore the unease. I cooked pasta, watched the mist roll down the slope. The forest felt closer than before, like the trees had inched forward while I wasn't looking. At 10 sharp, I checked the locks. Covered the mirrors. There were only 2, both with old cloths nearby, as if already prepared for the ritual. I left the porch light burning, the apple placed neatly on the rail. Then I sat in bed, phone flashlight in hand, pretending to read. The clock ticked past midnight before I heard the noise again. This time it wasn't knocking. It was footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate, pacing just beyond the door. Wood creaked under weight. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped. Then came a soft voice, muffled through the door. Ivan. The sound nearly stopped my heart. It was my own name, spoken gently, like someone calling from across a room. I told myself it was Marjorie. Maybe she'd forgotten something, or maybe she was testing the locks, seeing if I'd obey her rules. I wanted to open the door. Every rational thought screamed that it had to be harmless. But the words from the rule sheet floated back, cold and precise. Do not open the front door after 10:00 p.m., no matter what you hear outside. The voice came again, closer this time, as if whoever stood there leaned toward the wood. Ivan, please. It wasn't quite her voice anymore. I gripped the sheets, muscles trembling. The porch boards groaned once more, one step, then another, until the sound faded toward the yard. Silence returned, thick and absolute. When I finally dared to move, I saw something on the floor just inside the door. A damp footprint, small and bare, like someone had stepped out of the mist and onto my rug. The footprint was gone when I woke up. I don't mean I cleaned it or that it faded overnight. I mean it simply wasn't there anymore. The rug was dry, the wood unstained, as if it had never been touched. For a while I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Some trick of the flashlight and my half-awake brain. But when I went out onto the porch, there was a second apple missing, and a smear of something dark at the corner rail, like mud rubbed smooth by fingers. I told myself it was nothing. It had to be nothing. My rational mind tried to make a list of reasons: animals, damp floors, fatigue. I even wrote them down in the small notebook I'd brought for journaling. That felt safe, almost scientific. Observation: raccoon likely took apple. Hypothesis: the human voice was auditory illusion brought on by isolation. Writing it made it smaller somehow. By late morning the mist burned off, and sunlight washed over the slope. I hiked again, longer this time, as if distance could prove the world still obeyed normal rules. The air smelled of pine sap and wet soil. A pair of hawks circled high above, shrieking lazily. For a while, I forgot the night before. Then I found something that stopped me cold. Halfway up a narrow ridge, there was a clearing with an old picnic table, rotted, split down the middle. On its surface sat a single apple, perfectly red, untouched. No one else was around. The hair on my arms rose. It looked exactly like the ones from the bowl in the cabin. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but the sound that came out was thin and nervous. I left it there and walked back the long way. When I returned that afternoon, Marjorie's truck was gone. A note waited on the porch, folded neatly under a small stone. Going into town for supplies. Keep the porch light on tonight. Do not go outside after dark. That was all. The sun dipped early behind the ridge, leaving a bruise-colored twilight. I cooked dinner, eggs and toast, though my appetite had disappeared, and sat on the porch as the forest fell quiet. Around here, silence isn't empty, it's layered. You can almost hear the trees shifting against one another, the breath of the mountain underneath. I tried to distract myself by sketching the outline of the cabin, the way the light spilled unevenly across the rail. When I looked up, I realized the forest edge had vanished into darkness far earlier than usual. The mist wasn't rolling in from the holler like before. It was rising straight from the ground, curling up the slope in long gray fingers. I stood and reached for the apple bowl. My hand hesitated. The last few nights I'd left one on the rail because the rules said to, but tonight it felt different, like an offering I didn't understand. Still, I placed it where Marjorie always told me to. A shape of habit, a gesture of surrender. Inside, I covered the mirrors again, one in the hallway and one above the dresser. The air smelled faintly of apples and old wood smoke. I sat on the couch with a book. I wasn't really reading and waited for nothing to happen. It began with a tap. Not at the back door this time. The sound came from the window by the sink, soft, irregular, like fingernails brushing the glass. My stomach knotted. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faint outline of movement beyond them. Something small, maybe. I forced myself to walk to the kitchen. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my jaw. I lifted the curtain edge just enough to peek. Nothing. Just mist and the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. Except the reflection blinked a half second before I did. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The window stared back, calm and flat. My reflection moved normally again, as if nothing had happened. My mind clawed for explanations: the angle, the flicker of the light bulb, my eyes playing tricks. Anything but the truth that was trying to surface. I went to bed early, though sleep never came. Around midnight, the air shifted again. I felt it before I heard it. The cabin seemed to inhale the way wood breathes when temperature drops fast. Then came a faint rustle outside, followed by the soft crunch of footsteps. I lay there, paralyzed, staring at the ceiling. The steps paused by the porch, near the apple bowl. Then came a scrape, like nails dragging across the rail. The porch light flickered once, twice, then steadied. Something whispered from outside. I couldn't make out words, only the cadence. Slow, measured, coaxing. It sounded almost like a lullaby hummed through clenched teeth. I pulled the blanket to my chin and counted breaths. Every instinct screamed to get up, check, confirm. But the rules were rules, and some primal part of me already believed them. When morning came, I found the apple split neatly in half on the rail. The inside was clean and dry, as if it had been cut with a blade and left out for hours. There was no sign of rot, no insects. Just two perfect halves and a small indentation beside them that looked, impossibly, like a handprint pressed into the wood. I packed my bag that afternoon. I told myself I'd drive into town, maybe get cell service, maybe even leave early. But when I started the car, the engine stuttered twice and died. The tank was half full. I tried again. Nothing. That was when I saw Marjorie coming up the drive. She walked slowly, carrying a paper bag against her chest. When she saw me by the car, she frowned. "You shouldn't leave yet," she said. "Something's wrong with the car." Her expression didn't change. "It's better that way." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She set the bag on the porch and stepped closer. "You've been keeping the rules, mostly." "That's good. But it's only been 2 nights." I must have looked lost because her voice softened slightly. "The mountain needs to know you. It notices strangers. The rules aren't to protect you from it. They're to help it forget you when you leave." The words hit me like cold water. "Forget me." She nodded once. "Otherwise it follows." I laughed, a short, nervous bark. "You're serious." Marjorie looked toward the woods. "There are people who've stayed without listening. They don't stay gone. The mountain keeps their shapes." I wanted to tell her she was crazy, that I was leaving first thing tomorrow, no matter what, but the way she said it, quiet, factual, made denial sound childish. "Just 3 more nights," she said. "Then you'll be able to leave clean." She handed me a fresh apple from the bag. "Use these. Don't eat from the bowl anymore." That night, I did exactly as she said. I left one of her apples on the porch, brighter and firmer than the others. I checked the locks, covered the mirrors, and sat awake long after midnight. No knocking came, no footsteps, no voice. For a while, I thought the silence meant safety. Then I noticed something else. My reflection in the window wasn't moving at all anymore. It just stood there, smiling faintly, while I stared in horror. The reflection didn't move for a full 10 seconds. I counted them. 10 seconds of that faint, fixed smile, its eyes locked on mine. Then, as if a switch had flipped, it blinked and tilted its head exactly the way I did. The delay gone. The air in the cabin seemed to thicken. I forced myself to shut the curtains, hands shaking, and sat at the table until dawn bled through the seams of the window. When I finally stepped outside, the morning looked wrong. The mist had rolled in early, dense and cold enough to sting my throat. I couldn't see beyond the porch steps. But the apple I'd left was gone again, and there was a damp ring where it had sat. I didn't go looking for it. I decided to find Marjorie. Maybe to demand an explanation, maybe just to prove she was still real. Her house was supposed to be down the ridge, half a mile. I'd walked part of that trail before. It wound steeply through ferns and oak roots before leveling out near the creek. I took a flashlight, even though it was morning, and started down. The farther I went, the quieter it got. The forest here didn't hum like normal woods. It absorbed sound. Even the birds seemed to avoid it. Every now and then, I'd hear something distant, a faint scrape or shuffle. But when I stopped to listen, it vanished. I found the house after 20 minutes, or what I thought was her house. It wasn't much more than a collapsed shell, gray boards eaten by moss, a roof sagging under years of rot, no glass in the windows, no smoke from a chimney. The air smelled of wet soil and something faintly metallic. Inside, it was worse. Broken furniture, a rusted stove, a pile of animal bones in one corner, long picked clean. A single framed photograph still clung to the wall. A younger woman with the same braid, standing in front of what looked like my cabin. Her eyes were different, though. Sharper, almost defiant. I backed out slowly, pulse hammering. My mind scrambled to catch up with what I was seeing. Marjorie couldn't have lived here. Not recently. Not alone. I must have walked in circles on the way back because the trail seemed to shift under me. The trees leaned closer, their roots snaring the path like veins. I kept the cabin's direction in my head, repeating it like a mantra uphill. Right fork, light on the porch. By the time I stumbled out of the tree line, the sun was high but weak. The cabin looked unchanged, except for one thing: the door was standing open. I froze. I was sure I'd locked it that morning. Inside, the air was colder than outside, as if the wood itself was leaching heat. The curtains were drawn, but a faint breeze stirred them. On the kitchen table lay the laminated sheet of rules. I hadn't left it there. Someone, or something, had moved it. A new line had been written in neat, slanted handwriting beneath the 5th rule. 6. Do not look at your reflection after sunrise. It will not look away first. My stomach turned. The ink was still wet. I backed away from the table, scanning the room for movement. Everything looked the same. The firewood, the coat rack, the bowl of apples. But the silence was no longer empty. It was listening. I grabbed my duffel and stepped onto the porch, planning to walk down the road until I found anyone. Cell signal, car, gas station, anything. But the drive ended abruptly at the tree line, and beyond that there was nothing. No gravel road, no tire tracks, no sign I'd ever driven up. Just trees stretching endlessly downhill. I stood there for a long time, breathing in cold mist. The world felt smaller somehow, folded inward. Finally, I went back inside, because there was nowhere else to go. That night, I didn't turn on the porch light. I told myself I was testing her, or the rules, or the mountain. I wanted proof that this wasn't real, that the power was still mine. The darkness outside deepened until it felt solid, like a wall pressing against the windows. Then came the first soundy scratching at the door, soft at first, then more insistent. When I didn't move, it shifted to the windows, tiny, delicate taps, one after another, circling the cabin. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, every muscle locked. The noise stopped. Then the whispering began. It came from every direction, threading through the cracks in the wood. Dozens of voices, low and fragmented, like a crowd praying under their breath. I couldn't make out the words at first, only the rhythm. Slow, deliberate, too synchronized to be wind. Then, under the murmur, one voice rose clearer than the rest. Mine. Turn the light on, Evan. My whole body went cold. The voice wasn't an imitation, it was perfect. Tone, breath, even the subtle hitch I had when saying my own name. I shut my eyes, shaking. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Turn it on." I fumbled for the flashlight, flicking it toward the window. For a split second, I saw shapes pressed against the glass. Vague outlines of faces, pale and formless, their mouths open in silent unison. Then the beam flickered out, plunging me into darkness. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke, gray light filtered through the curtains. My watch said 9:17 a.m. The porch light was on, though I was sure I'd left it off. Outside, the forest looked calm again. Ordinary even. But when I opened the door, I froze. The apple from last night sat perfectly centered on the rail, unbitten, untouched, but carved into its skin in clean, shallow letters were 3 words I-O-U-S-T-I no do. I dropped it. The apple rolled off the porch and disappeared into the fog below. By noon I was pacing the cabin, trying to force some kind of logic. Maybe someone was out there. A local, a prankster, a trespasser. Maybe Marjorie was real but deranged. I needed proof. Something tangible. I decided to hike back toward the road, even if it meant getting lost again. I left a note on the table in case someone came the. If you find this, call for help. My name is Evan Mercer. The woods were darker than they should have been for midday. The light felt thin, filtered through too many layers. I walked for what had to be an hour, but the trail never changed. The same fallen log, the same split oak, the same curve where the creek should have crossed, and yet no water ran. Eventually I broke through to another clearing. My stomach dropped. It was the cabin. Not mine exactly, smaller, older, warped, but unmistakably the same design. The same porch rail, the same crooked chimney, and sitting on its steps, her cardigan pulled tight against the wind, was Marjorie. She smiled faintly when she saw me. "You weren't supposed to wander," she said. I stared at her. "Your house is gone." She tilted her head. "It's right here." I looked again. The rot, the collapsed roof, the bones, all gone. The cabin looked solid, freshly built, smoke curling from the chimney. I felt something lurch inside me. "I saw it," I said. "I was there this morning." It was abandoned. Marjorie's smile didn't falter. Sometimes the mountain shows what it remembers, not what's true. She stood slowly, dusting her hands on her cardigan. "You left the light off." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. She nodded, as if I'd confirmed her suspicion. "It noticed you." "Who?" I asked. My voice barely worked. "The one who knocks," she said simply. "Now it knows your name." Behind her, the forest began to move. Not the wind, but something deeper, a pulse through the trees. The shadows thickened like liquid. I took a step back. Marjorie's eyes softened with something almost like pity. "You have 4 nights left," she said. "Keep the rules. Don't listen if it calls again." And before I could say another word, the mist closed around her and she was gone. When the mist swallowed Marjorie, it took the sound with her. The woods fell flat. No birds, no wind, no heartbeat. I stood in the clearing for too long, waiting for her to step back out. She never did. I found my way to the cabin by instinct more than direction. The path looked unfamiliar now, roots curling across it like veins in a living thing. By the time I reached the porch, the light above the door was flickering, even though I hadn't turned it on. The bulb pulsed in a steady rhythm, almost like breathing. Inside, the air felt thicker than before, heavy enough that every movement stirred it like water. The smell had changed too. Less cedar, more iron. Something metallic threaded through the wood smoke, sharp and clean, the way blood smells when it first hits air. I dropped my pack on the table and froze. The rule sheet lay there again, centered perfectly, though I'd left it under a book that morning. The handwriting had changed. The first 5 rules were the same. The 6th still warned about reflections. But now there was a 7th line beneath it, written in an even, measured script 7. When you hear it inside, do not hide. It already knows where you are. I stood there staring at it until my eyes blurred. A draft moved through the cabin. Every nail in the walls seemed to creak in sequence, as if the structure were shifting its weight. I told myself to pack, to leave on foot, to run downhill until I hit a road. But outside the windows, the light had gone wrong again. It wasn't dusk yet, and still the forest looked like evening. Bluish shadows layered, so thick I couldn't tell where the trees ended. I lit a fire out of reflex, just for the sound. The crackling grounded me. For a while, it even felt normal. Then the flames leaned sideways without wind, like something had exhaled against them. The floorboards answered with a low groan. I turned. The hallway beyond the living room looked longer than before. Just slightly, like the cabin had stretched while I wasn't watching. At the end of it, where the bedroom door used to be, darkness pooled like liquid. I should have checked the mirrors. I should have covered them first. Instead, I called out, "Marjorie." My voice didn't echo. It came back softer, slower, from the dark. "Marjorie." My own tone, my own breath, but delayed, reshaped, as if someone behind the door had swallowed my words and tried them on. I stepped forward. The sound followed, always one footstep behind. The air grew colder with each step until I could see my breath. I reached the bedroom doorway and flicked the flashlight on. The beam caught the mirror above the dresser, still uncovered. My reflection stood in it, but the room around it wasn't the same. In the glass, the cabin looked decayed. Walls blackened, roof sagging, furniture draped in cobwebs. My double smiled faintly, tilting its head. Behind it, a figure moved, a shape taller than the doorway, skin the color of ash. Its face a blur of shifting features like wet clay, trying to remember a shape. I dropped the flashlight. The beam swung across the floor, cutting the image in half, but the thing in the reflection didn't vanish. It leaned closer, until its formless face filled the glass and the surface rippled like water. I stumbled backward into the hall. My shoulder hit the wall, hard enough to rattle a picture frame loose. It fell, shattering the silence. Then the cabin went still again, so still that I could hear the slow tick of the wall clock above the fireplace. 1, 2, 3. Each ticked louder than the last until it became a knock. At first I thought it was in my head, but the sound spread. Floorboards, windows, the back door, all pulsing with the same heavy rhythm. A heartbeat from the wood itself. I remembered the 7th rule. When you hear it inside, do not hide. So I didn't. I stood in the center of the room, every instinct screaming to crawl under the bed or run into the trees. The knocking grew faster. The fire guttered and flared. The porch light outside burned steady and white, brighter than it should have been, casting shadows that moved even when I stood still. Something brushed the back of my neck. Cool, damp, and careful. I spun around, but there was only air. Then the whisper came again, right beside my ear. "Stay now." My legs nearly gave out. The voice was soft, patient, the same one that had used my name nights before. But now it sounded pleased. The cabin seemed to sigh, boards flexing outward as if drawing breath. The door to the bedroom creaked open on its own. Inside, the mirror gleamed faintly in the firelight, though I'd swear the angle should have left it dark. I took one step toward it, then another. The reflection waited. Me, but not. Its eyes were calm, almost kind. Behind it, the gray figure loomed closer, its hands resting on my other self's shoulders. "Why?" I whispered. The reflection's mouth moved, but the voice came from behind me. "Because you answered." The light flickered. The mirror's surface began to cloud, not with steam, but with depth, as if it opened into something colder, wider. I felt it pulling at me. I reached out before I could stop myself. The glass was warm. Too warm. My fingertips sank half an inch before the surface hardened again, trapping them. Pain shot up my arm. I yanked back, leaving faint red marks across the skin. The reflection smiled wider. The gray shape leaned close and whispered something into its ear. A sound escaped both their mouths at once, half sigh, half laughter, and the mirror went black. The knocking stopped. I stood there shaking until the fire burned down to coals. When I finally dared to move, I covered the mirror with a blanket and sat against the wall until daylight. But when morning came, the blanket was folded neatly on the floor, and the mirror was gone. In its place was the laminated sheet of rules, pinned to the wall with a nail I hadn't seen before. Every line had changed. 1. Keep the porch light on. Always. 2. Leave an apple for the one who knocks. It will take only what it's owed. 3. Do not look for Marjorie. She has done her part. 4. When the reflection smiles, listen. It is teaching you how. 5. Do not leave. You are home. The ink bled as I read, letters running together until they formed a single dark stain that looked almost like a handprint. Outside, the mist had lifted. For the first time in days, the forest looked bright and calm. I stepped onto the porch, half expecting the world to vanish again, but the sunlight was real, the trees steady. Birds sang somewhere deep in the valley. For a few seconds, I felt something close to relief. Maybe it was over. Maybe the rules had finished whatever game they'd started. Then I saw the apple on the rail, perfectly red, carved again. This time it didn't say "Why you stay londu." It said "Welcome ha my even." The apple stayed there all morning, gleaming in the sunlight like something alive. I watched it from the window while I made coffee I didn't drink. Steam drifted upward, but the smell was wrong, metallic like wet coins. When I finally looked down, the cup was empty. I told myself I'd leave anyway. Walk until the trees thinned, flag a car, something. But every time I stepped off the porch, the forest bent in on itself. The path that should have led downhill now curved sideways, swallowing its own tracks. The same two birches appeared again and again, like sentinels watching for hesitation. By the third loop, I realized I wasn't walking alone. I couldn't see it, just the echo of my own steps arriving half a beat late. When I stopped, it stopped. When I breathed, the woods seemed to exhale. It was patient, whatever it was, content to let me tire first. I went back to the cabin and locked the door. The clock above the fireplace had stopped at 9:17 a.m. The same time it had shown the morning, I found the carved apple. The second hand twitched once every few seconds, but never advanced. I pulled the battery out. The twitching continued. A sound came from behind me then, a single thud, like something heavy dropping onto the porch. Through the window, I saw another apple on the rail beside the first. This one darker, almost black, its skin slick with dew. A message carved into it in the same neat hand he ate. I didn't move for a long time. Then the door handle turned. Slowly, deliberate, metal against wood. It didn't rattle like someone testing it. It turned halfway and stopped, as if the person on the other side were waiting for permission. The rule sheet from the night before flashed in my head. Keep the porch light on. Leave an apple. Do not leave. Maybe this was what home meant here. Obedience. I stepped closer to the door, the boards moaning under my weight. The air smelled like rain, though the sky outside was clear. When I reached the handle, I pressed my palm against it. Warm. A pulse beneath the metal, faint but steady. A whisper came through the wood, softer than breath. Hungry. My throat went dry. The voice wasn't mine this time. It sounded old, layered, many tones speaking in unison. I turned the lock. The door opened without resistance. Mist rushed in, cold and damp, curling around my ankles like smoke. The forest outside wasn't the same one I'd seen that morning. The trees were closer together, darker, their bark slick and glistening. The ground shone faintly, as if reflecting a light that wasn't there. On the steps sat the black apple. I crouched and picked it up. The skin was cool, the carving shallow. My name had been added beneath the word E8. I didn't want to, but something in me moved anyway. I brought it to my mouth and bit once. The taste wasn't fruit. It was earth and ash, and something faintly sweet, like the smell of old cedar smoke. The moment it touched my tongue, the forest shifted. Every sound collapsed into one deep tone. The air thickened until I could barely breathe. The trees bent toward the cabin, their trunks elongating, their roots sliding through soil like muscle. The door slammed behind me. When I turned, the cabin was burning. Not with fire, but with light. Soft gold spilling from every crack, too bright to look at directly. The boards pulsed with it, each beam flexing like ribs, and in the doorway stood Marjorie. She looked younger now, maybe 40, her braid dark instead of silver. Her eyes were calm but distant, like she was seeing through me. "You shouldn't have eaten it yet," she said. I tried to speak, but my mouth was full of that bitter sweetness. She stepped closer, and I realized her feet didn't touch the porch. "It remembers you now. The mountain always eats what it's given." "What is it?" I managed. Her expression softened. "Home." Behind her, the cabin's light flared. I saw movement inside, shapes pacing in the glow, tall and narrow, like silhouettes stretched against the walls. They shifted in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Marjorie," I said. "Help me leave." She shook her head. "You came too far. Leaving isn't forgetting anymore." The light dimmed. When I blinked, she was gone again. The door creaked open on its own, spilling warm air into the mist. I didn't want to go inside, but my body moved forward like it had been rehearsing the motion all along. The interior was larger now. The walls had drifted apart, making room for new corridors that hadn't existed before. Each one led to another door, another room with faint whispers behind it. The fireplace was still burning, but the flames were blue and still, frozen in mid-motion. I followed the sound of breathing down one of the halls. My footsteps didn't echo. They answered, slightly delayed. At the end stood a mirror taller than me, its surface faintly rippling. In it, I saw not the cabin, but a forest at night. The same slope outside, except the trees were bent backward, their branches clawing the ground. In the center of that reflection stood someone who looked like me, barefoot, expressionless, hands slick with something dark. When I raised my hand, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he smiled, the same small, patient curve I'd seen the night I first heard the knocking. From behind the mirror came the same voicey, "Keep walking." I stepped closer, unable to look away. My reflection did the same, but its movements were smoother, more deliberate. There was a depth behind its eyes that didn't belong to me. "Who are you?" I whispered. It tilted its head. "Who's asking?" The glass flexed outward, just enough to distort my reflection's mouth. Its hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, palm matching mine through the surface. A hairline crack spidered out from the contact point. Pain lanced through my hand. Real, sharp. Blood welled where the glass fractured. "Let me out," it said, and I realized too late which side of the mirror I was on. I stumbled back, clutching my palm. The crack sealed itself instantly, the surface smoothing like skin healing over a wound. My reflection stayed there, calm, watching. Then, without warning, every other mirror in the cabin, ones I hadn't even noticed before, lit up at once. Each one showed a different version of me, sleeping, laughing, screaming, standing outside under rain that wasn't falling here. The reflections moved independently now, not mimicking, but observing. From the fireplace came a low hum, deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. The blue flames stretched taller, twisting into vague human outlines before collapsing again. Whispers filled the space between each breath. "You are home. You are home. You are home." I clapped my hands over my ears, but the words vibrated through bone instead of air. The cabin groaned, every board flexing inward. The walls pulsed closer, then farther, as if the whole structure were breathing in rhythm with the chant. When it finally stopped, I was on the floor. The fire had gone out. All light had drained from the windows. Only one thing remained visible, the rule sheet pinned beside the door, faintly glowing. A new line had appeared beneath the last to 6. The mountain forgets those who become part of it. Sleep now, Ivan. It will dream of you kindly. I don't remember lying down, but I must have. The boards under me felt soft, like soil. My eyelids grew heavy. I thought I heard footsteps again, moving carefully through the house, pausing beside me. A cool hand brushed my forehead. Then the voice, mine, hers, theirs all at once, whispered, "Sleep. You've earned your place." I think I closed my eyes. Or maybe the mountain did it for me. When I woke, the world was quiet in a way I'd never heard before. Too complete, too finished. No wind, no heartbeat, no rustle from the trees. Even my breath made no sound. Light came through the windows, but it wasn't sunlight. It had a weight to it, a slow pulse, like the glow at the bottom of a lake. The air tasted sweet and rotten at once. My tongue felt coated in something metallic. The cabin looked the same at first glance, but the more I stared, the more it shifted. Corners didn't line up. The ceiling bowed, breathing in and out with long pauses. The clock on the wall ran backward, its hands smooth and lazy. Every time the second hand reached 12, the room brightened for an instant, as though something on the other side blinked. I sat up. My body didn't ache. That was wrong. After nights on that floor, I should have felt every nail through my spine. Instead, I felt nothing but warmth, the soft pressure of air holding me up. My first thought was that I had died. My second was that I hadn't, at least not completely. The fire was out, but the ashes glowed faintly blue. I reached toward them and felt the heat from a distance, like it recognized me. The whispering was back, so low it might have been under the floorboards. Not words, just motion, a tide rolling beneath language. I went to the window. Outside, the forest wasn't green anymore. The trees were translucent, filled with slow, moving light that pulsed through their trunks. The ground shimmered with shallow reflections, faces rising and sinking in the soil, too quick to catch. The mountains beyond looked like silhouettes carved from glass, bending in the heat of some unseen sun. I pressed my hand against the pain. It rippled under my skin, soft as breath. The reflection looking back wasn't me this time. It was still, patient, waiting. Behind me, a voice said, "Morning, Evan." I turned. Marjorie stood by the table, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked both older and younger, her face lined but glowing from within. Her eyes didn't focus on me so much as through me, as if I were a photograph she half remembered. "I told you the mountain would dream of you kindly," she said. "What is this?" My voice came out flat, distant, like it traveled through water. She smiled, almost motherly. "It's what comes after following the rules." "I don't understand." "You don't need to." She moved closer, feet not touching the floor. "You listened. That's all it ever asks." I stepped back. My heel brushed against the rule sheet, still nailed to the wall. Only 5 lines remained visible now. The rest melted into blank wood. "Am I dead?" I asked. Marjorie tilted her head. "Dead is a city word. You're remembered." The way she said it, it felt like both blessing and sentence. Something flickered behind her. Shapes shifting in the light. Outlines of people standing just beyond sight. They faced me but didn't move. The whispering grew louder, resolving into the faint rhythm of breathing. "Who are they?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Guests who stayed." My stomach twisted. "You mean?" "They followed the rules. Or almost did. The mountain keeps what it's given." I wanted to scream, but the air refused to carry sound. All that came out was a dry gasp. Marjorie reached out, her fingers brushing my arm. They left a smear of pale light on my skin that didn't fade. "You'll learn to breathe its way soon. You'll help it forget others when they come." "No." I backed away, hitting the door. "I'm leaving." She almost looked sad. "There isn't a door anymore." I turned the handle anyway. It opened, but not to the porch. Beyond it stretched a corridor of cabins, hundreds, maybe thousands, each glowing faintly in the half-light. Some were perfect replicas of mine, others leaned or sank into the ground. Shadows moved behind their windows. Farther out, I could see more lights flickering in the mist, like a town breathing in slow unison. I stepped through. The air thickened, humming softly. Behind me, Marjorie's voice followed, barely a whisper. "Remember the apple." The door shut itself. The corridor floor felt soft, spongy, as if woven from moss and heartbeat. Every step made the walls shiver. I passed one cabin with its curtains open. Inside, a man sat at a table, head bent over a notebook. When he looked up, I recognized him from one of the mirrors. One of the reflections that hadn't followed my movements. His lips moved soundlessly, shaping words I couldn't hear. The paper in front of him bled black ink that crawled across the surface like veins. Further on, a woman stood outside another door, holding an apple in both hands. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth moving as if reciting rules. When she saw me, she smiled, the expression too wide. The apple in her palms split cleanly in two without her touching it. I kept walking. The corridor turned, descended, then opened onto a clearing that shouldn't have existed indoors. Mist coiled around stunted trees. At its center stood a massive mirror, taller than a house, its surface rippling like storm water. Figures moved within it, dim and numerous, pacing, knocking, calling. Every so often one would press against the surface, leaving a pale handprint before dissolving. The whispering converged into a single phrase, murmured by 1,000 voices at once. "You are home. Help us remember." Something in my chest loosened, a slow spreading warmth that felt like surrender. For a moment I saw what they saw. The mountain as a living thing, its roots webbed with light, its rivers like veins, its memory stretching through everyone who had ever vanished here. I saw Marjorie younger, laughing. Then the host before her, and the one before that, each feeding the same hungry calm. I should have felt horror. Instead, I felt peace, thick and golden, the reflection closest to me. my own, but calmer. Extended a hand through the glass. It didn't distort the surface this time. It passed through cleanly, shimmering where skin met light. Behind me, the cabins began to hum, doors creaking open one by one. A tide of warm air flowed forward, carrying the smell of cedar and apples. The mirror whispered again, almost tender, "Come back inside." My hand rose, not entirely by choice. The warmth spread from my chest into my arm, into my fingers. When our palms met, the world tilted. Light swallowed everything. I was back in the cabin. Morning. Ordinary light through ordinary windows. The rule sheet lay on the table, laminated and neat, 5 simple lines printed in black. 1. Arrive before dark. 2. Keep the porch light on from dusk till dawn. 3. Leave an apple on the rail each night. 4. Do not open the door after 10 p.m. 5. Respect the quiet. Everything else, Marjorie, the whispers, the mirrors, was gone, except for one detail: the host's name on the note by the keys. Host, Evan Mercer. I stared at it until the paper trembled in my hand. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. A car door slammed. Through the window, I saw a woman step out, young, suitcase in hand, smiling nervously as she looked up at the cabin. I opened my mouth to call out, to warn her, but the words came out gentle and practiced, the way Marjorie's once had. "Glad you made it," I said. "Please arrive before dark. It's easy to miss the turnoff after dusk." And when she smiled back, grateful and unsuspecting, I realized the mountain had already taught me how to speak in its voice. Her name was Rachel Anders, 28, graphic designer from Atlanta, visiting Bryson City to unplug for a week. She'd written that in her booking note, with a smiley face. I remember typing it once, almost word for word. The drive up the ridge was steeper than she expected. She missed the last turn twice before spotting the wooden sign half, swallowed by kudzu. By the time her tires crunched over the gravel drive, dusk was bleeding into the trees, that slow blue hour when everything looks like it's holding its breath. The cabin waited with its porch light already burning. Rachel stepped out of the car, stretching the stiffness from her neck. The air smelled cleaner than city air, sharper, like pine and iron. She stood for a moment just breathing it in, listening. No cicadas, no traffic, only the soft thrum of wind curling through the trees. When the front door opened, she jumped. A man stood there, tall, maybe mid-30s, calm-faced, with dark hair brushed neatly back. His eyes were a gray so pale they looked almost translucent. "Evening," he said. "You must be Rachel." She laughed, embarrassed. "Sorry, you startled me. Happens a lot out here. I'm Evan, the host." He smiled. The kind of polite, careful smile people use when they're waiting to see how much space they're allowed to take up. "Glad you made it before dark. Most folks get turned around on that last stretch." He sounded practiced, though she didn't notice. Inside, the cabin was spotless, old wood polished, the faint scent of cedar and smoke lingering in the corners. The place had lived in warmth, like someone had just left the room. A bowl of apples sat on the counter. Even handed her a laminated sheet. "House rules," he said. "Nothing strange, just local habits." Rachel took it, half amused. I didn't think Airbnbs had rules anymore, just cleaning fees. He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's a quiet spot. The mountain appreciates routine." She skimmed the page. 1. Arrive before dark. 2. Keep the porch light on from dusk till dawn. 3. Leave an apple on the rail each night. 4. Do not open the door after 10 p.m. 5. Respect the quiet. When she looked up, Evan was already at the door, hand on the frame like he was listening for something beyond it. "If you need anything, I live just down the ridge, he said. But you won't. And before she could answer, he stepped into the twilight and was gone, swallowed by the same mist that always rose after sundown. Rachel unpacked, humming under her breath. She took a photo of the living room for Instagram, but the upload failed, no signal. She set her phone aside. The quiet settled thickly, deeper than she expected. By 9, she was reading by the fire. Around 9:45, she remembered the apple. It seemed silly, but she picked one from the bowl and set it carefully on the porch rail. The air outside was colder now, the mist pressing low. The woods looked motionless. She shut the door behind her and locked it. At 10, she heard it. A single, polite knock at the back door. Her head jerked up. Maybe Ivan had forgotten something. She called out, "Hello." No answer. The knock came again, 3 beats, slow and deliberate. She hesitated, remembering the line on the rule sheet. "Do not open the door after 10 p.m. She smiled nervously, shaking her head. "Cute," she muttered. Maybe it was part of the experience. A local gimmick. She'd seen weirder things on Airbnb. She went to bed. Around midnight, she woke to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Not heavy, but rhythmic, bare feet on old wood. The porch light glowed through the curtains, flickering slightly. Then, from just beyond the window, a soft voice called, "Rachel." Her breath caught. The tone wasn't threatening, gentle, almost affectionate. She sat up, pulse hammering. "Ivan." The voice came again. "Please." Her mouth went dry. It was the same cadence, the same inflection she'd heard earlier, but flatter, hollowed out. She thought of the rule sheet on the table, its laminated edges catching the firelight. The voice leaned closer. "Let me in." Rachel grabbed her phone, forgetting the lack of signal, pressing the dark screen to her chest like a talisman. "This isn't funny," she whispered. The knocking started again, soft and patient. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. Then silence. In the morning, the apple was gone. She laughed about it over coffee, convincing herself it was raccoons. But when she stepped onto the porch, she noticed something carved faintly into the rail, quam hama. She rubbed it with her thumb. The grooves were shallow, almost fresh. That afternoon, she hiked near Deep Creek, snapping pictures of moss and waterfalls. The air was thin and kind, the sky a sharp blue that made her forget the night before. By the time she returned, the sun was already dipping behind the ridge. Evan's truck sat at the base of the drive. He was standing by the porch, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Everything all right?" she asked, forcing a laugh. "Someone was knocking last night. Thought it might have been you." He tilted his head slightly, as though weighing the question. "Did you open the door?" "No." His shoulders relaxed. "Good. What happens if I did?" He smiled faintly. "Then you'd never need to check out." Before she could respond, he nodded once, turned, and walked toward the trees. His figure dissolved between the trunks, leaving only the echo of his boots. That night, Rachel followed the rules again. Apple on the rail, porch light on, curtains drawn. She didn't hear the knocking this time. She didn't hear anything at all, not even her own breathing. When she woke at dawn, the apple was back on the rail, unbitten, perfectly red. She lifted it, confused, and found words etched into its skin, small and precise. Keptherales. She stood there for a long time, the chill creeping into her bones, until she noticed the shadow on the ground. It stretched wrong, longer than her height, tapering toward the cabin door. Inside, the clock ticked backward, its hands gliding to 9:17 a.m. Somewhere in the walls, a quiet voice murmured, patient and proud, "Good. You're learning." The mountain never changes, but the faces do. The porch light always burns. The apple is always eaten, or isn't. The names shift: Marjorie, Evan, Rachel. Whoever follows the rules becomes the next to write them down. And if you ever find yourself in a small cabin outside Bresson City, with a laminated sheet of rules and a bowl of apples on the counter, look at the host's name before you unpack. If it's yours, it's already too late.